Hi, everyone. I want to personally invite all of you to come to JCN's second Freedom Fighters Summit and Gala on May 1st and 2nd in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. This event is going to be a who's who of conservative political figures. Media stars like Hugh Hewitt, Sarah Carter, Trish Regan, and Mike Gallagher will be joined by political minds like Kellyanne Conway and Steve Moore, as well as Governors Glenn Youngkin from Virginia and Brian Kemp from Georgia. You'll also get to meet yours truly and Alfredo Ortiz, the hosts of Main Street Matters, and many of our past guests. There'll be great entertainment too, from the comedy legend of Rob Schneider to music by country superstar Lee Greenwood. There's a limited number of seats, so reserve your spot today. Go to jcn2025summit.com and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. Again, go to jcn2025summit.com now and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. And get your tickets before they sell out.
America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone.
Hello, and welcome to another podcast, another episode of Main Street Matters. I am Alfredo Ortiz, the CEO of Job Creators Network, and today I have the distinct pleasure of having former Secretary Alex Acosta. Secretary Acosta served as the 27th United States Secretary of Labor from 2017 to 2019. Secretary Acosta has also served in 3 presidential appointed Senate confirmed positions. And he is a board member of Job Creators Network. And most importantly, he's a dear friend of mine. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Main Street Matters. I forgot to mention, you're also going to be at our summit in Savannah on May 1st and May 2nd, talking about one of your favorite topics, which is deregulation. I know something that you and I did a lot and worked a lot on when you were Secretary of Labor. So we're going to be excited to hear a little bit about that, and maybe you can preview a little bit of what you're going to be chatting about. But again, that event is going to be our second event in Savannah, Georgia on May 1st and May 2nd. So we're excited to have you there. And for folks who are interested in getting tickets, is JCN2025summit.com. That's 2 M's and 1 T. And look forward to seeing you guys there. Mr. Secretary, how are you?
Alfredo, first, let me say thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited to be on your podcast and really looking forward to our panel. I know we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I just want to take a minute to highlight something that I think is particularly important to so many of your listeners, which I'm sure you'll talk about elsewhere. But that's the fact that the SBA administrator, the Small Business Administration Administrator Loeffler, is going to be at that summit. And, something that I think is so important is under this administration, the SBA is changing. Their approach is changing. It is becoming much more friendly to small business. And how the new SBA is going to impact small business, I think, is an incredible topic, really important. So I want to thank you for covering that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited. I've had some great conversations with Administrator Loeffler about this event and what she can cover. And it's going to be really great. She's really going to talk about the things and the changes that she already has in the works and has been approved along with the president's efforts. And so we're super excited to hear about that. She just has some great ideas. And we're fortunate as Job Creators Network, we're going to be working alongside with her to make sure that a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about over the years is implemented. So it's going to be such a breath of fresh air. I don't know if you remember my frustrations, but I never even got a chance to talk to the previous administrator of the Biden administration. In fact, still don't even remember his or her name, to be quite honest, which that's how bad they were to small business.
They were all about, increasing the regulations. They weren't focused on business. And so, look, I mean, Main Street Matters is something that she gets. She's always been close to JCN. And so I'm excited for you and to hear her.
The Trump administration, you're one of your favorite things about how his policies in the first administration, but now in the second administration, how some of those policies you think are really going to be helping now our small businesses, unlike the previous administration, like I said, had really, really ended up hurting with $2 trillion of regulations burdening in them.
Well, I think it's important that we acknowledge that today, as we're filming, he just rolled out his new tariff plan, and a lot of people are scared about that. But if you take a step back, part of what's happening is the multinationals, the large corporations that sell internationally, that are as invested outside the United States as in the United States, are worried. And from their perspective, I get it. They sell a lot in China. They sell a lot in Europe. They manufacture in Europe and in China. And so they're looking at this from a global perspective. But President Trump is different. He understands that his obligation is not to the globe, but to the American people. It's called America First. And he is focused on creating jobs here, creating profit opportunities here. And ultimately, that is going to help small business, because small businesses are invested in America. They're not invested in the globe. They are not global companies. They're American companies. And ultimately, the America First agenda is going to, above all else, I think, really unleash small business.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned the tariffs. Obviously, big news over the past couple of days, and I completely agree with you. I mean, the one thing we know about President Trump, he is the deal maker in chief. I mean, he is Monty Hall for sure. Let's make a deal. I just read just before we came on air that Vietnam has already come to him and saying, hey, they want to drop tariffs down to zero if we're willing to drop tariffs down to zero. And so, look, this is going to happen somewhat. In some cases, it's going to be fast, I think. In some cases, it's going to be longer. Manufacturing companies, I think, will come back. We know that's a longer-term process. And in the short term, though, I think that's why we're pushing hard for the Tax Cut and Jobs Act extension, not only another 10 years, but to make those permanent, not only for our big corporations, but really for our small businesses. There were two really important provisions that were in there that we want to make sure are included again. And in fact, hopefully, even expanded on, which was a 20% tax deduction. We hope that if we do see a 15% corporate tax rate, I'd love to see that increase to 25%. And of course, immediate expensing. Those two things alone had such a positive impact. And look, it really translated to more jobs across the economy. And I think that's why we saw such a great boom under the Trump administration. And so I think it's really critical. The one thing I will say, though, is that as we bring manufacturing jobs to this country, we do still have that labor shortage, Mr. Secretary, which you and I have talked about a lot. How do we address that on a short term and a longer term?
Well, we do have the labor shortage, and the labor shortage is critical because we need people. Folks think that there's lots of folks out there looking for work. There actually aren't. There are a lot of. We are close to full employment at one level. At another level, we have people that have been sidelined and people that are, in jobs where they can't make the most money. And so we need to take a step back and ask, how did we get here? And I think a large part of our problem stems from way back when we split education and workforce training between the Department of Education and the Department of Labor. And we said, there are some things for which we can get student loans because they're parts of degrees, and there's some things for which you can't get student loans. And so if you get a bachelor or an associate's degree in general studies, you can get student loans. But if you want to go be a welder, if you want to, welders started at 70, 80,000. If you want to work on high electricity, high power lines, which is over 100,000, there's so many jobs that support families that make lots and lots of money. And we do not support the workforce education for those jobs because they're not part of a college degree. And so as the president looks at the Department of Education, one thing that I hope happens is that we stop this artificial separation between jobs that require degrees or pretend to require degrees, because a lot of the jobs don't really require degrees, and jobs that don't, so that we judge people based on, are you supporting your family? Are you making a great wage, rather than on whether you have a piece of paper? And honestly, part of the issue here is that so many colleges and universities are just making money off young people, not teaching skills, and really not preparing them for the workforce.
Hi, everyone. I want to personally invite all of you to come to JCN's second Freedom Fighters Summit and Gala on May 1st and 2nd in beautiful Savannah, Georgia. This event is going to be a who's who of conservative political figures. Media stars like Hugh Hewitt, Sarah Carter, Trish Regan, and Mike Gallagher will be joined by political minds like Kellyanne Conway and Steve Moore, as well as Governors Glenn Youngkin from Virginia and Brian Kemp from Georgia. You'll also get to meet yours truly and Alfredo Ortiz, the hosts of Main Street Matters, and many of our past guests. There'll be great entertainment too, from the comedy legend of Rob Schneider to music by country superstar Lee Greenwood. There's a limited number of seats, so reserve your spot today. Go to jcn2025summit.com and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. Again, go to jcn2025summit.com now and use promo code JCN2025 BOGO50 to get a second ticket at 50% off. And get your tickets before they sell out.
I think culturally, over the past, let's say 20 years, it's been this idea that these types of jobs, manufacturing jobs or jobs that really require, let's say, your hands, right? Like hard skills, are dark, dirty, and dumb, right? These are those jobs, right? That's how people think about it. They're so critical. And by the way, I mean, you think about a plumber and electrician in New York. I mean, you know how much they make? It's absolutely. I looked it up. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, that we need to do more of that, and I think we do have to figure out how to. Linda McMahon has her hands full, but also be able to direct resources to get more of these folks, trained, so we can have that skilled labor force.
It really takes me off, and when I hear some of this stuff, and an example that I often talk about is a community that says we need a new hospital, and they will go out and they will say we need to educate more doctors, we need to educate more nurses, we need more bachelors in healthcare bureaucracy to process all that paperwork, right? But then we'll say, and we need more immigration so that we can build that hospital. And that's so wrong. If you actually look at the data and you line up the general contractor that's building the hospital with the doctor, the contractor with the nurse, the skilled tradesman with a little bit of less skilled nursing, sort of an intermediate level nurse, and the laborer with the nurse's assistant, at every level, the people building the hospital make more money. Yet, for some reason, we don't think that they are the Americans. We want to go abroad and find them rather than provide those skills to Americans. And that's just wrong.
Yeah, it really is. It was funny because I was thinking about, a lot of these, dollars now that may be freed up, hopefully through education freedom and through a lot of the efforts that the president wants to do of, basically block granting, whether it's to the states or directly to the parents, a lot of these education dollars. I'm really hoping it opens up the opportunity for, let's say, even at the high school level, to pursue trade schools. Yep. Because I think there's just so much opportunity there. A good friend of mine is one of the higher executives at Home Depot, and they see this need just all across the board in every single trade. I mean, there is literally, it's almost like a dying skill. And we're going to be so woefully sorry, because I'm sorry, but AI can only go so far. I mean, I don't want an AI robot taking care of my plumbing.
Well, Alfredo, we try to put together a national apprenticeship program to support these skills and to teach these skills, and we're blocked. The left just blocked it. Secretary DeVos tried to put together a workforce Pell program so that you could be eligible for federal financial aid, not just for a bachelor or an associate's degree, but for acquiring skills that lead to real jobs. And it was blocked by the left. And so a lot of these efforts have happened before. But, the president learned from that. The president recognizes that they will try and so to block it. And so he's moving so quickly. It's hard to believe it's only been 2 months. And look at how much has changed. And I'm very, very hopeful that he's going to, as soon as labor is up and running fully, that you're going to start seeing these programs coming out of labor. And of course, education, as it's being reduced, a lot of that can be merged with workforce training.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about that because, as I mentioned, you're on one of the panels, and I'm just so excited about how it's all come together. But it's called Choke on This, right? Basically, how regulation is killing the economy and has killed the economy, and so deregulation is so important. I know one of the efforts that you and I had actually worked on together, really try to get out there to help our small businesses, was it's called AHP, Association Health Plans. Can you talk to us a little bit about that program? Because I have to tell you, I think you and I need to make sure that that comes back and that we do more for our small businesses under the guise of this AHP idea.
Sure. It was really simple. It's something that small businesses had wanted for over a decade, and we made it happen. We wrote the rule. Immediately, some left-leaning states sued us, and then it was blocked. And then the Biden administration completely dropped it. And here's what it would do. If you look at healthcare, and any small business owner recognizes that the cost of healthcare is one of the biggest cost factors completely outside their control. If you look at healthcare, the large corporations can actually have less regulations than the small businesses. The large regulations have less mandates than the small businesses. It's utterly backward, right? The IBMs and the Washington Posts have less rules than the local cleaner and the local restaurant. And as a result, small businesses pay on average about 30% more for healthcare. They're in the small group market. Companies with 50 employees or less pay about 30% more for healthcare because they have all these rules and regulations they have to comply with. And so what we said is very simple. We said, why don't we create association health plans? Why don't we make it so that all the small businesses in Atlanta or in any city, in any region can come together and under the Chamber of Commerce, right? The Las Vegas Chamber of Commerce, for example, say, we're going to unite and we're going to offer one health plan. And that health plan is going to go by the rules of the big companies. And so it's going to be about a third cheaper. And I'll tell you that the Las Vegas Chamber, for example, was very excited. They had, in a matter of months, over 200,000 individuals signing up for that plan because it was cheaper and it provided better healthcare. It had all the standards that apply to the big corporations. And so they were able to provide more benefits for less money, the same way the large corporations do. And one other advantage is if you go from one small business to another, if you move from one restaurant to another restaurant, you don't lose your healthcare. You are not bound to your employer because the healthcare doesn't come from your employer, but it comes from the Chamber of Commerce or the Restaurant Association or the Industry Association.
Right. It was that portability of the insurance, I know, is so important for the average American, quite frankly, to be able to have
the portability. And the left killed it, and I'll tell you why they killed it. They said it was so good that it would make people leave Obamacare, leave the ACA, and that would hurt Obamacare. And so, even though it was a great idea, we don't want it because it's going to undermine Obamacare. It's going to undermine their concept of universal coverage, and so they killed it. But we need it back.
I mean, that's just it's one great example, I think, of the deregulation efforts that we need to make sure we have in place. I'm so excited that President Trump gets it because I'm positive that he can bring something like that back. I know another effort, for example, that we got some traction on was reciprocal licensing for military spouses. That's something that I hope really gets expanded on a nationwide basis as well. Because talk to us a little bit about that as well, because that's another was a deregulatory effort that you pushed forth and you got some traction on.
This is what I'll call a no-brainer. It's so obvious. I found out about this as an issue when I heard that a military spouse had moved from California to Florida. And she was providing diet advice online to California clients from Florida. And Florida issued a cease and desist because she didn't have a Florida dietitian's license. So here you have a spouse that moved with their military service partner, their military serviceman husband, from California to Florida on orders. She was working, and Florida says, oh, you can't work anymore because now you're in Florida, unless you go back to California and you sort of separate the family unit. And so, there are so many spouses that have to decide between staying with their family unit or working. And that is just plain wrong. The military service person that is serving us. They're serving our nation. We can do better. And so JCN, as you know, got together a meeting of several governors, and we talked about this. And governor after governor, primarily in red states, came up with rules that say, if you're a military spouse and you're licensed in one state and your other spouse moves to another state on orders, you can continue to practice in that other state as long as you have no complaints against you. This is literally a no-brainer. That should be the case everywhere, not just in red states.
Yeah. That was another great example of just this. Yeah, and it was relatively small, but I mean, the impact that it had on a positive basis for all these military spouses was amazing. I mean,
if I could correct you, Alfredo, and you're usually completely on top of this, but it wasn't that small. We're talking about 200,000 military spouses. That's 200,000 jobs. That's 200,000 families that can be together. Where husband and wife can be together, taking care of their kids, where both spouses can be working. That is significant.
That one actually deserves at least a cup of coffee then, I guess, doesn't it?
It does.
No, that's great. I mean, these are just, a couple examples of stuff that we can do. I mean, when you unleash, the economy, when you take those regulations, you unleash a very powerful force. Again, I mean, $2 trillion of regulations is what the Biden administration put on top of the economy. That's on top of the inflation aspects of it. I mean, how we survived those 4 years, I have to tell you, is beyond me. And I'm so glad that President Trump is moving at the speed that he's doing, because it's basically shock and awe, but it's what has to be done. Quite frankly, I think the Democrats always knew how to do that. We never quite did. But President Trump is doing it. He's showing some courageous moves, like we talked about the tariffs. Not necessarily going to be popular at the beginning, but boy, did we need it. I mean, we have really been taken advantage of. We had a small business owner, for example, who wanted to sell chocolate chip cookies in China. And the only way they would allow that is if he revealed his entire proprietary recipe and process of how to do that. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. We had another small business owner that, unfortunately, he said, there's a big market out there. I really want to do it. The only way, he manufactured widgets, basically. He said, the only way I can get that market opened up to me is if I provide him with all of my proprietary information. Well, guess what happened? 6 months later, they copied the exact same thing, and they came back at half the price. And they put that entire piece of business out of business for him. And so for too long, I think the American, economy has been taken advantage of. I think we've been taken advantage of. And so these courageous moves, while there are going to be, I think, periods of what I call slight instability or discomfort, even, I mean, it just has to be done.
You're absolutely right, Alfredo. And China does that to everyone. They want to know all your proprietary technology. They want to know all your secrets. And then all of a sudden we get knockoff products. And, the tech world gets that because the tech world often refuses to share and therefore doesn't get access to their market. And that's just unfair. But I want to mention, because you talked about all these regulations, and, we started off this podcast by saying, where are we going to find the workers? And, 200,000 military spouses here. But if you look at the regulations, it's not just the cost of business, but it's about all the jobs that they take away, that could be doing and producing things that are just spent pushing paper. And we've talked about this before. You've looked at the data. During the 4 years of the Biden administration, if you look at all the net job creation, about 1/3 was in government. Okay, that's not really adding to our economy. About one third was in what I'll call government adjacent jobs, which primarily healthcare, but to some extent education, and about one third in actual private sector jobs, right? And what we're seeing now is we're seeing that reversed, where we've had very little growth in government since President Trump took over. There's still growth at the state levels and negative growth federally. So it's about flat now. Very little growth in healthcare and education, and it's all private sector. And so we need to shift all these jobs away from pushing paper and from bureaucracy to producing things, to contributing in a positive way to our economy.
Yeah, I mean, boy, that is so right. I mean, I know there was a lot of, I mean, when President Trump announced, these federal workers are going to, basically lose their jobs and stuff like that. I can't believe, there were like protests and stuff. It's like, look, all he's really honestly doing is freeing up labor to able to, I mean, these are all skilled people in some way, shape, or form that can be put to use in the private economy.
Right.
And frankly, we don't need more federal taxpayer dollars, or quite frankly, the printing of money, which is all the only thing that was pretty much sustaining our economy, to have those kinds of jobs. Let's put them to productive jobs. And we mentioned Kelly Loeffler, how excited I am about her taking on this role. This is something that she wants to do with the SBA, is to make sure that they actually help improve the success rates for our small business owners. I mean, in doing some of my due diligence in my conversations with her, I found that small business owners have a failure rate, for example, in their first year of 20%, which is pretty crazy. And the number one reason why they fail is because they don't have a business plan. Imagine if we actually took the SBA to actually focus on what they're supposed to do, and not making loans, not doing, political whatever they were doing in Michigan, but actually teaching the fishermen how to fish. Let's teach them how to actually become stronger entrepreneurs and business people by creating strong business plans. We can take that from 20%, let's say, in 4 years down to 10%. Just theoretically, think about this. You have 33 million small business owners. Could not one maybe make the assumption that we can create another 15 million small businesses by cutting that failure rate in half? And if each small business employs 2 people, which is on average right now what it is, that could be 30 more million employees, American workers, being put to work through small businesses.
You're so right. And I don't have the exact data, but I bet you the size of the SBA and the workforce at the SBA grew under the Biden administration. And here's my question to all the small business owners listening. Do you feel that the SBA is better able to assist you and support you because they're twice the size now, or 3 times the size, or however they've grown? And I'm willing to bet lots and lots that the answer is no, they're not.
Mr. Secretary, I did review those numbers, and let me tell you what they are. They're scary. As a total entity, it's actually, the size of a pea relative to the federal budget. It's $1.4 billion for the SBA. But of that $1.4 billion, $445 million is payroll. What?
So
small business, and the advocacy,
about a third go to the bureaucrats.
Yeah. And the line item of advocacy, which is what they're supposed to be doing, what they were chartered to do, $10 million. $10 million.
So what are they doing?
That's what we're all wondering. Like, what are they doing? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the idea of, closing up shop in DC, pushing them out to the regional offices, making those entrepreneurship centers. I mean, quite frankly, I was speaking to Administrator Loeffler about this. Actually take the loans out of your whole system, right? I mean, first of all, they're antiquated systems. I know that because I was involved with the Paycheck Protection Program. And so the computer systems themselves are super antiquated at the SBA. Push those off to commerce, let those be handled by, the private sector, whatever. But focus on advocating and teaching our small business owners how to succeed. What a novel idea, right?
But that could be done in so many places. Healthcare, I've seen the data in healthcare, and we provided, in the last, during the 4 years of President Biden, we created net hundreds of thousands, in excess of 1 million jobs in healthcare and healthcare adjacent sectors. But they weren't doctors. They weren't nurses. They were bureaucrats. Do we think healthcare today is better than it was 4 years ago? Like, has healthcare transformed? Has this million plus, number of workers transformed healthcare? Or do we just feel like we're filling out more forms? Is that making us
Right.
healthier? And look,
Right.
the answer is obvious, but the focus on all this regulation and all these forms and all these government workers needs to end. It's not helping Americans.
Right. Right. I mean, these are the kind of conversations I'm so excited we're going to be able to have in Savannah, Georgia on May 1st and May 2nd, Mr. Secretary. Again, for folks who are listening, jcn2025summit.com is where you can get your tickets. Super excited to be able to have these conversations. And I will tell you, it's going to be an intimate event. I've never been a fan of those events where you have thousands and thousands of people and it's just some distant memory. And you walk out of there thinking, what did I just do for the past 2.5 days, right? I want to make sure that people walk out of there with marching orders, right? This is what we need to do and we can do and must do to help the president's America First agenda to be successful. And so that's the goal of us walking out of that 2-day meeting, is to do that. And that's pretty much what it is. We're going to have some fun, by the way, because I think conservatives also forget that you can also have some fun on the side. But more importantly, we're going to walk out with marching orders, marching papers, and people are going to know what to do to help the president out.
And what I love about your events, Alfredo, and I remember last year when you did this in Palm Beach, the reception went for a good chunk of time. I enjoy the receptions a lot. That opportunity to talk, and there was small business owner after small business owner that I got to meet and talk to. I ended up meeting the owner of a restaurant in my hometown of Miami. And, he and I talked for a while. I've been going to his restaurant for years. That's not typical at a lot of these events where the speakers and the participants have so much time to interact at social hour. Yeah. I think that's an important part. I think it's not just the panels, and I love that you do that.
Yeah, and thank you for actually pointing that out. It's super important. We believe you have to be able to interact with the people that, quite frankly, you work for, right? I mean, and I would throw myself in that. We work for our small business owners, right? We work to be their voices. We work to be their advocates. How are you going to do that if you don't know what their issues are? And you will hear it live. I mean, you will have some people that stand up in the audience, for example, when we have one of these panels. I anticipate they're probably not exactly too keen on some of the stuff that's going on. But we got to hear about that. We got to hear about their issues. I mean, because that's the reality that we're all going to be dealing with. And so, that's why we've kept it intimate, and we're going to keep on doing that as long as we can, because I think that's the best way. These are some movers and shakers. I mean, not only yourself, but I'm just going to go down through the list briefly here. When we got Governor Kemp is going to be there from Georgia, Kellyanne Conway, Hugh Hewitt, Governor Youngkin from Virginia, Kelly Loeffler, as we talked about, is going to be there. We have some media stars like Sarah Carter, who, by the way, now is going to be our new, she's a border czar, I think is the actual title that she's been picked for. Like I said, yourself, we have a couple Congressman Collins, E.J. Antoni, which you all have probably seen on Fox many, many times, from the Heritage Foundation, super smart. Senator Ernst, very excited about that. She helped us with the Prove It Act, getting that past the finish line, and hopefully we'll get that passed over on a game changer, really for our small businesses, really being able to finally give them a voice at the table before the regulations actually take into effect, so we're not only looking at lawsuits to stop these. Dave Bratt, Secretary Bill Bennett, who I know you've worked with before, Grover Norquist, we on the good old Grover, Stephen Moore, Charlie Gasparino from Fox News, Governor Sununu. So it's quite a lineup, right? It just keeps on going. I mean, these are the conservative thought leaders, and we're just really excited to have this opportunity to have this event and have you there.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and what I love about it is the opportunity to also, as we're talking, I'm thinking I need to mention to Senator Ernst the whole spousal licensing issue, because I bet you that she would be all over that. She was in the first Trump administration. And it's such an opportunity to really push the issues that we all care about. And for the participants to talk to individuals that can then raise their issues and make a difference.
Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. I know we're out of time here. Do you have any parting words before we say goodbye?
Only that I hope we can do this again right after the conference.
All right, I will definitely make sure that we do this many times afterwards. So, again, thank you very much for your time, and we always enjoy having you on our Main Street Matters podcast, America's Small Business Megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network, and we have new episodes that debut every Wednesday and Friday. Don't forget, we want you to join us at our second JCN Freedom Fighter Summit and Gala, May 1st, May 2nd in Savannah, Georgia. Get your tickets now, and that is jcn2025summit.com. Thank you very much, and look forward to the next episode of Main Street Matters.